I mean, they're big artists, but like some of the more like this generation artists. But anyway, I made a remix or a mashup with them. So.
Is that stuff on your SoundCloud? Not yet.
And not yet. I probably will put it on my SoundCloud though. It'll also be on YouTube. So I made my Clean Boppa channel. So I haven't posted on it. I haven't posted on it yet, but
Yeah, but it's there.
yeah.
I'll have to subscribe.
It might not show up until I post something, but I'll let you know.
Yeah.
Like probably by next Sunday.
Your account should still be there. I'll look it up.
My 3 accounts that I have posted on will be there. I don't think the Clean Boppa account will show up yet, but probably by next week you'll be able to find it. And then I'll probably put some of the stuff on SoundCloud too. I'm just saying. Like I told him, probably by next week you'll have like at least one Clean Boppa video put out or something. What? I'm just saying.
I feel like there's an easy
This is a little bit of an earn system, so it's calling a shot.
Just let the players get off the court.
All right.
One later come and say, hey,
Do you have a good weekend?
here's your main seated until
Not really.
You want to rush it.
Yeah, I didn't got it all this week.
I'm surprised it doesn't happen.
It's fine.
How else do you fish?
Like work or fun.
I'm stunned it does not happen.
If I'm not working, like once or twice a week.
Where are you? What's your favorite?
Probably the tailwaters here. This.
100 people are in.
If I'm working a lot, though, I don't usually fish for fun.
Regular fishing or
So you can sneak one in.
That's all I do.
That's all you do.
I'll get away with it.
What's fly
It's like it's a type of fishing where you're not casting the weight of a lure, because the lures you use are really, really tiny. So you're using the weight of the line instead. So you got to use a lot of momentum and like physics to get the line to cast out.
Oh yeah, that kind of.
You ever see videos of guys that are like casting their like lines like looping like away from their heads?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When did you start doing that?
10. Yeah. And that's
I
the
think
lodge
I
I work for is a fly fishing lodge. So that's like all they do. So that's South Wilson River Lodge.
I want to say I've heard of that.
Oh, yeah.
It's a good little operation.
Wow. I had one player.
It takes more skill to fly fish, right?
It's just different.
Like no one does normal fishing.
Right.
Yeah, I kind of just went.
I love fishing. It's very peaceful.
Never been actually.
I know. I kind of get nervous about the whole, we don't have any kids, but then the whole license thing, like, I'm like, well, how do you get a fishing license?
Oh yeah, you can just get it online.
Really?
Oh yeah,
We do kayaking sometimes.
it's cool. You see a lot of kayakers on the rivers in the summertime.
Yeah, we've never kayaked in the ground for that skill. We just need to be like,
You just go on the lake.
pretty still,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
We don't shoot for the stars.
See the Durant game with the Dallas fan the other day? So Durant was coming on the court like football clubs. And apparently like there's like a husband and wife sitting on the first side.
Oh, Blake.
Yes, sir.
I found a new art. Well, he's kind of been on my playlist for a while, but I just haven't told you about him yet. Do you know who Prince is? You don't?
I think so.
He makes some Christian songs.
What's his name?
Prince.
How you spell it?
Prinz.
Hey.
Yeah. He has some normal music, but most of his stuff is like Beautiful Days about like Jesus giving like everyone a, or you understand what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
And then Highs and Lows is his most popular one.
Cool. Nice.
But yeah, he's got
I'll
some
check it
cool
out.
stuff on there.
You're always my source of getting good music.
Yeah. It's
Listen
because
to-
I find a lot of small artists. I mean, he's not really small. He's got 2 million people, but
Sure. I mean, I haven't heard of him though. So
yeah,
cool, man.
most
I
of
needed
the unheard artists.
new music. So
Yeah. Yeah, some of his stuff is like he does covers. Like he makes his own. Like he'll do covers of songs and then make into a rap song. So like
Clarification.
Die Young, the song that's
Yeah.
like If I Die Young,
Mhm.
that one right there. It's who's the band that did Die Young?
The country song?
The band here?
The band
Dan
Perry.
Perry. That's it. Yep.
But he made a cover of it and turned it to a rap song.
Cool. Very cool, man. I will check him out.
He also did Peter Pan. He made that one a rap
Mhm.
song, and then he has some of his own like highs and lows, and a few other ones.
Cool.
Life Story, that one just came out. It's a pretty good one.
Yeah,
Talks about
fresh.
how he grew up,
Cool, man.
but it has some stuff about God in there and
Sweet.
stuff too.
Yeah, I'll check it
It's
out.
pretty cool.
Like
Yeah.
church league, Mosaic church league basketball.
Oh my gosh,
See?
I would be in.
Put a team.
I would not be good, but I'll be in.
I can coach.
I haven't like had done like physical exercise in a long time, so I was rocking Louis the other
Same.
night, and I was like standing up rocking him, and I was like, oh my god. I came out and I was like, I need a second day.
I actually
I'm exhausted.
messed up my hamstring. I have this giant bruise right here.
What'd you do?
I don't know.
Well, his friend kicked him. You always
Oh.
put that in there. 'Cause everybody's like, "What'd you do?" And I'm
But-
like, then like halfway in the story, he's like,
He-
"So kicked me in the
He
back."
didn't really hear.
That's a side point.
Yeah, I know, but when you take the rubber from your shoe and you get it on your hairy legs, it pulls and tugs and hurts.
I think I messed it up because I sprinted that 200 like full speed.
Yeah, and Drew's got the flexibility of an 86-year-old man.
Nice. Yeah, I can't be. I'm not flexible either.
And there's this girl on our track team who can turn her body almost in a circle.
There's a point. Yeah. All right, everybody. Welcome. Welcome. Anybody listen to Armchair Expert? Welcome. Armchair Expert. You guys know what I'm talking about? Dang.
What were the experts?
Huh?
They're the armchair people.
What? What'd you say?
They're armchair experts.
Armchair
What can
experts.
What can we do?
Welcome to Armchair Expert. Expert on experts. Let me just give you guys an example.
Okay.
Let's see. Who did you interview recently? Jason Bateman.
Mm,
It was incredible. The interview's incredible. That's how he starts every episode, though.
okay.
Welcome to Armchair Expert.
Here.
I'm Dan. Welcome to Armchair
Welcome.
Expert. I'm Dan Shepard. I'm joined by Monica Monson.
Anyways, that's what I was trying to go for. Welcome. Sorry, I had a song planned. I need to just get it back. All right, I'm gonna open up this little blowing bubble.
That's what he was doing last night too.
No, this is what happened. He was crying for a very long time, and we were both getting frustrated. And Taylor was like, "I'll just stand up and rock him." So she got up and rocked him. As soon as she like picked him up, he started blowing bubbles and was like happy as can be. And so look at him.
And he still hasn't had a nap this morning.
Oh boy.
Look how chunky. All right, I'm gonna read you guys something from Merton, obviously, because I can't not. So this is New Seeds Contemplation from Merton. He has a chapter called "We Are One Man," and it's like 5 pages, and it's just absolutely incredible. So I'm pretty sure I've underlined everything in this section. So I'm just gonna read a little bit of it, and then we'll play you guys a song, and we'll name the good, and then we'll talk about how to judge others and call each other pigs. So that's the plan, at least. So this is Merton. The more I become identified with God, the more I will be identified with the others who are identified with him. His love will live in all of us. His spirit will be our one life, the life of all of us and the life of God. And we shall love one another and God with the same love with which he loves us and himself. This love is God himself. Christ prayed that all men might become one as he was one with the Father in the unity of the Holy Spirit. Therefore, when you and I become what we are really meant to be, we will discover not only that we love one another perfectly, but we are both living in Christ and Christ in us, and we are all one in Christ. We will see that it is he who loves in us. Just keep going. The ultimate perfection of the contemplative life is not a heaven of separate individuals, each one viewing his own private intuition of God. It's a sea of love which flows through one body to all the elect, all the angels and the saints, and their contemplation would be incomplete if it were not shared, or if it were shared with fewer souls, or spirits capable of less vision and less joy. I will have more joy in heaven and in the contemplation of God if you are also there to share it with me. And the more of us there will be to share it, the greater will be the joy of all. For contemplation is not ultimately perfect unless it is shared. We do not finally taste the full exaltation of God's glory until we share in his infinite gift of it by overflowing and transmitting glory all over heaven and seeing God in all the others who are there and knowing that he is the life of all of us and that we're all one in him. This is the last paragraph, I promise. For in my soul and in your soul, I find the same Christ who is our life, and he finds himself in our love. And together we all find paradise, which is the sharing of his love of the Father in the person of their Spirit. I love the whole back and forth of we find each other in God, and I'm in God, and you're in God. And the more joy, I have more joy because we're both there in God. I just want to hold on to that. I think it's beautiful. So I'm going to play a song for you guys. It's by Chris Renzema called Narrow Road. It's actually new. I think it's beautiful. So I'm going to play a song for you guys, and then we'll name the blank again. So here's the song.
Walking for a while, my feet getting tired, my heart's a little red, but you keep me going. Been walking for a while, mile after mile, my soul's a little weary, but you keep me going. You keep me going. You said it'd be a narrow road. You said it'd be a narrow road. So why am I surprised when I see down my road? You said it'd be a narrow road. This world will never be my home. Journey might be long, but I'd never be alone. Oh, I'd never be alone. Been walking for a while, wandering a while. You're holding me steady. Yeah, you keep me going. Been walking for a while, fighting the fire. The spirit is within me, and it keeps me going. We said it be narrow, we said it be narrow. Why am I surprised when it seems I'm alone? We said it be narrow. This world will never be my home. Journey might be long, but I'll never be alone. Oh, I'll never be alone. So I will walk wherever you're leading, climb by day and fly by evening. You're the lamp that's guiding my feet so I can see where I am going. I will walk wherever you're leading, climb by day and fly by evening. You're the lamp that's guiding my feet so I can see where I am going.
Let me pray real quick, and then we can name the good together. God, we take a second to come as we are with what we have to the table. And God, whatever it is that we have that we're carrying, or maybe we're not carrying anything, God, I pray that we just show up. So as we're here physically, God, I pray that my heart, my soul, my mind is also here. I pray the same for my friends. So help us to be tuned in with you, with each other, and help us to see each other and see you through that. And God, we want to learn. We want to learn from you how to live like you in the world. And we ask you for your help and your grace, and we praise in your name. Amen. All right, everybody, we can name the good or fill in the blank because that's been fun lately. So fill in the blank, name the XYZ, whatever. What you got? Hi. Taylor's been making me watch The Bachelor with her lately.
Oh, come on.
And
That's the one that's like, well, we had a conversation with Kate the other night, and then like pulled it up the other night. I was like, we should watch it.
well, that may or may not be true. It has been fun to have this narrative with Taylor of just what we joke about and watch, and it's become a thing that we talk about now. It's just been funny. So I'm suffering through it with her, but
And I really haven't
she's
watched
twisting my
it
arm.
since, like, high school.
It is compelling though. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in Bachelor that's questionable, but also like really interesting. So
It's questionable.
More so questionable.
I have a lot of thoughts. I'll say it one day. I need to think about it more.
What are your thoughts on Maria? I'm dying to know.
Maria, she's the most unique one, isn't she?
It is.
No.
For sure.
I have less thoughts on Maria. I have a lot of thoughts on Joey. He's an incredible dude. He's very smooth. He asks really good questions, man.
Always having a good week.
He holds his own well. I mean, he's got 30 women crying on him every 2 minutes, you know. So
Yeah, that sounds great there.
he's a great therapist. Yeah. So, anyways, that's been fun. I'll say that. Anything else?
I don't think I mentioned this when I came back, but I was able to stay in touch with some of the people that I met in my facility. And I made a lot of new friends, and we all got better together from our mental illness. And now I have the ability to stay in touch with them and see how things are going. And I even got one of the staff's information because he really enjoyed having me there. I mean, none of the staff want us to be there,
Sure.
but like he just always thought I was like really nice and everything. But yeah, I'm just glad that I was able to. Like I didn't want to be there, obviously, but I'm glad that I was able to at least have some memories made from there.
Sure. Very cool. Thanks for sharing that. Anything else? Nothing. All right, that's fine. You guys want to talk? We'll do some things real quick. If you want to follow along, go to Matthew chapter 7. All right, this past January, I have a new goal this year. I'm trying to read a little bit more. I'm trying to reach a certain amount of books. And the first book I had planned is a book called Creativity Inc. It's by a guy named Ed Catmull. He's a co-founder of Pixar, and he served as its president up until 2019, I guess. And an incredible book. It's all about creativity and fostering culture that's creative, and it was awesome. He talked about all Pixar movies, and it was really cool. But he talked about two things I thought were really interesting. I read it. The first is something called hyperphantasia and aphantasia. You guys know these words? New to me. Hyperphantasia and aphantasia. Fantasia. Okay. Hyperphantasia, it's hard to even say, is a condition of having extremely vivid mental imagery. Okay. It's the opposite of aphantasia, which is where visual imagery is not easily accessible. It's not present. He gave an example of, for his artists, for the animators, when they're sketching a scene, when they're designing a scene, a certain group of his animators, of people in the world, can see the page fully in their mind, and they'll draw the image as they see it in their mind. Another group of people have to approach it from a completely different standpoint. The most popular, or one that he talked about, was they had an emotion in the scene, and they would draw the person or the image off of the emotion that they were feeling or try to go off of. So if you ask the person, if I ask you guys to picture a bright red apple, the majority of people can actually picture a bright red apple, and it looks realistic. It doesn't look like a cartoon. It doesn't look fuzzy. It doesn't look half there. It looks like an actual apple in your mind. Is that true for everybody? That's a small number of people, but some people can't do that.
Mine was cartoon.
There you go. Look at that. Really interesting. So some people can't have a full image in their brain. And he talked about the necessary parts of having both kind of animators on his team was because one side, it's like you could easily debate like which one's better for an animator. And it's like, it seems like the one that can actually image or the whole image. But he said like the one that has aphantasia, get the words all right. It's like they're approaching it from a completely different standpoint, from an emotional standpoint, not from a strictly visual standpoint, which is really interesting, the dynamic. He adds on to it, this is that the average person takes in only about 40% of what you do see. So whenever I'm looking at people or whatever in the world, you're only taking in about 40%. The other 60% is just from memory. So your brain is doing all these jumps, okay? It's saving time. You could look at all the research. It's really interesting to me. Your brain is not registering everything that you're seeing, okay? Input 60% from memory, which is just kind of mind-blowing. So today we're talking about judgment, casting judgment. And I think it's really interesting because Jesus makes a connection between how you see and the judgments that you're making. I don't think it's far off to actually make the connection that Jesus is talking about and what Ed Catmull was pointing out in those two things. I'd like to use the breakdown. Where does casting judgment take place? Is it taking place in the 40% of what's actually happening in front of you, or in the 60% of what you think to be true? What if your memory is faulty, or if it's subject to bias or prejudice or whatever? How do you incorporate that? What if it's just a massive assumption? What if you have aphantasia and you're not fully picturing things in your mind, or you're taking in an emotion, or if that's different than what actually happened? All that stuff. I think it's really interesting to tease out how our brains are actually working. So we'll talk about that in just a second. But remember, the Sermon on the Mount is this: it's good news. There's nothing that makes you ineligible to participate in the kingdom of God. You're welcome at the table. The people that were surrounding Jesus were not the people who were killing it at life. And Jesus is saying, like, you're welcome at the table. You can participate in this new way of life. There's nothing that makes you ineligible. This new Jesus kind of life is accessible to you. And Jesus doesn't promise that it's all going to work out and it's going to be easy and it's all going to be fun. He does promise that you may find a deeper resonance to your life, a deeper resonance and deeper meaning of philosophy of life that you give yourself to. So, judgment, casting judgments. It's a famous line from Jesus. He says, "Don't judge, lest you be judged," as the KJV says, which is fun, but incredibly misunderstood. I've talked about this actually twice before, but I'm trying to focus in on the judgment part. Carl Jung is famous for saying, "Thinking is difficult, and that's why most people judge." It's interesting. Epictetus, who was a Greek Stoic philosopher, he said, "It isn't the things themselves that disturb people, but the judgments that we make about them." So the truth is that whenever we do make judgments about people or things in our life, there's a whole lot more going on than us just saying, okay, this is good and this is bad. Judging is easy. It doesn't require much work. It's like your brain is like trying to make the jumps and assumptions and maybe trying to save yourself time, all that. Also, Barna did a poll. They asked thousands of non-Christians what words identify Christians for them. And the number one word was judgmental. Rock stars, aren't we? Jesus is talking about that today. Okay, and I think it's really compelling. I remember Matthew chapter 5, verse 20. Jesus says, "Your righteousness needs to be deeper than that of the Pharisees." And as he's knocking on the door of casting judgments, I think that's exactly what he's talking about. Because for most people, most Christians, Pharisees of their day, most people now, Christians now, a way to make ourselves more righteous is to be more judgmental of people. You know, that's how we puff ourselves up. And Jesus is saying maybe we should posit another way, perhaps stricter, tighter, more doctrinally pure, politically right, or whatever. You're just generally better than everybody else. Like that's how we make ourselves feel more righteous. And Jesus is saying, okay, maybe there's another way. So Matthew chapter 7, we're gonna read it through verses 1 through 6, and then we'll talk about each verse. All right, verse 1: "Do not judge, and you will not be judged, because the judgments you give are the judgments you will get, and the amount you measure out is the amount you will be given." The Greek words they keep using the same word. It's hard in the Jerusalem Bible, but in the NIV or ESV, sorry, it says, "Judge not that you be not judged, for with the judgment you judge, you will be judged. With the measure you measure, it'll be measured to you." Just for fun. That has nothing to do with anything. I thought that was fun. Keep going. Why do you observe the splinter in your brother's eye and never notice the plank in your own? How dare you say to your brother, "Let me take the splinter out of your eye," when all the time there is a plank in your own? Hypocrite, take the plank out of your own eye first, and then you'll see clearly enough to take the splinter out of your brother's eye. Do not give dogs what is holy, and do not throw your pearls in front of pigs, or they will trample them and then turn on you and tear you to pieces. Incredible stuff from Jesus. So opening verse 1, Jesus says, "Don't judge." Sounds great. Don't judge, or you too will be judged. Simple enough. Then he adds, "The same measurement that you use to judge someone else will be used to you." The idea of a measuring scale is not unique to Jesus. It was used widely in that culture, in Jewish thought. Even the phrase, "as one measures, it will be measured back to one," was a common phrase for the Jews. So Jesus is kind of riffing on something that they would have heard before. Now, just to get a little deeper in, this is what we like to do, is that word judgment in the Jewish mind is actually really beautiful. A better word, I think, to translate it that helps us is the word weighing. You're going to weigh something. There's a weighing. And as you put these things on the scale, it's going to be balanced out. It's not just about how things work, but how things are supposed to be. It's in this beautiful mindset. So in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Bible, the same word judgment is a word for justice. It's mishpat. It's the same word. It's a vision, a compelling, beautiful vision for how human life can be, which is awesome. It's concerned with the full enhancement of human and social life. The impulse for the Jews is looking to a time, trying to embody it now, and look towards a time when our society is going to be ordered according to principles of caring for each other, taking care of each other, everybody being on the same level playing field and having enough. So judgment then for the Jews is a proper weighing out in life of humans taking care of each other, us putting good into the world, all that stuff. So as you weigh things, You're weighing the good and the bad. It's like, what have we put into the world, and what's it going to do on the scales? The intention is human and world flourishing. Okay, so zoom out for a second now. Most judgments that take place in our world, would you say that is for the intention of human and world flourishing? Like, probably not. Like, it's usually to take people down, or to be derogatory, or to puff ourselves up, to degrade someone else, to have the arrogance of assuming that we're right and those people are wrong, all those things. People kind of get high off of the fact of knowing who we're more right than, more transformed than, more evolved than, whatever. And it happens in every direction. Left versus right, conservative, progressive, Christian, non-Christian, atheist, theist. Multiverse MCU storyline is great versus multiverse MCU storyline is trash. Anybody? I think it's great. Cheeto Puffs, we did this a couple weeks ago. Cheeto Puffs versus Cheeto Originals. Anybody? I didn't know what to call it. Is it crunchy? Cheeto Originals? Cheeto Crunchies. We all know who's right and who's wrong, and we battle it all the time. And that's why I like that I did that poll on Super Bowl. Is it the Chiefs, or is it 49ers, or is it Taylor Swift? Trying to add a third in there because we're not going to be dualists. Okay. Now to just keep going a little further in the Old Testament, there's a consistent image for judgment, and it's water. Okay. You guys know there's lots of these Old Testament passages that talk about water. At the same time, they use this image of water for judgment. Water is also an image of the fullness of life for them. And it's a beautiful combo, actually. It's a symbol of purification, both in good and bad. We're going to purify the bad, and it's this beautiful participation in the life of God. Divine judgment and life to the full is expressed as a flow to participate in. It's God's going to unleash it onto the world. We can participate in it. We can take it in. God's going to pour out his life on humanity and on the world. And to do what is good, true, and beautiful is to be aligned with that, to be aligned with this flow from God, to be submerged in it, carried away from it. And it's like all over the Old Testament, just to name a few. When Israel would follow the covenant, God talked about how the rain was going to fall and their land is going to enjoy blessing. When people practice judgment well, they're going to be watered like a garden. That's what Isaiah 58 says. Ezekiel's temple vision, he has this crazy vision at the end of Ezekiel, and he sees water pouring out of the temple, and it's like watering the earth, and everything's growing again. So many things. Amos 5, let judgment well up like water and righteousness like a flowing stream. Everything's happening at the same time. Why don't you just hold that image in your mind? A point is that water is both nourishing and powerful. It's creating canyons. It can create canyons and sweep away cities, and at the same time, it's going to irrigate fields and create life. It's something that humans can block and also channel in positive ways. There's a famous Zen saying. It says, empty your mind, be formless, shapeless like water. If you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. So if you put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. The water is not going to go beyond the boundary. Okay, that's the point. It meets it. It fills the void. It doesn't extend it. It meets it. Lao Tzu, he's another famous philosopher. He said, water is fluid. It's soft and it's yielding. But water will also wear away rock, which is rigid and cannot yield. As a rule, whatever is fluid, soft, and yielding will overcome what is rigid and hard. It's a beautiful paradox. What is soft is strong. It's really, really beautiful. God's judgment is that then. It is, in a sense, it is going as far as we've put this evil into the world. There's a boundary, and this judgment is that line there. Same time, that same water is something that's soft and fluid, capable of restoration as we partake in it and participate in it. So taking those two verses alone, don't judge lest you be judged with the same measure that you judge or be measured out to you. It's actually a beautiful call for us to be overly and lavishly generous with our love, with our forgiveness, with our acceptance, with our generosity, with our patience and gentleness and kindness and goodness to others. Because what we put into the world is going to come back to us. Now further, Jesus takes it some more steps, which is really interesting. He uses the whole in Old Testament, in the KJV version, it talks about a mote and a beam. Have you guys ever heard that? It said the speck and the splinter and the what's my Drew somebody will say, the splinter and the plank. KJV says mote and beam. So you have this little speck in one eye, and you have this massive beam in your eye. Okay. Jesus is basically saying the one seeking to remove the issue in the brother or sister's eye actually has the larger issue, suggesting that the one who attempts to help the brother or sister out is the one who's actually blind and hypocritical and has the major one. It's like, do you know people who do this? They're overly arrogant and they're also overly unself-aware. So we can just name people. If it's your spouse, like, don't say anything. Just kidding. Not us. And notice Jesus starts out with saying, don't judge. And then he gives prescriptions on how to judge. You guys notice that? He says, don't judge. But when you see that speck in your brother's eye, notice the plank in your own. Take the plank out, and then you can help your brother. Really interesting to me. And so Jesus may not be prohibiting judgment. Okay? He may not be saying, actually, just don't judge at all. He may be saying that your judgment needs to be changed. It needs to be shifted. It needs to be different. I think there's a lot of wisdom around the concept of seeing. When Jesus says don't judge, he's not saying don't judge because your brother has something in their eye and you have something in your eye, so just don't say anything. He doesn't say that. He says, like, the truth is that they do have something in their eye that probably needs to be taken care of. His emphasis is on how you do it. It's not that the what of what you're doing, it's the how of what you're doing. So as you see the speck in their eye, make sure you notice and take inventory of the massive beam in your own. As you weigh out things that's happening in the world, people's lives, make sure you take inventory of the scales that you're using, because that's how it's going to be used on you. So some people read this teaching from Jesus and say we should judge everybody. This is more of the conservative reading. Like, we should be very, very judgmental. There's another reading that would say we should judge no one. Like, that's a very famous thing. We'll look at Jesus and say Jesus taught that we shouldn't judge anybody. And Jesus seems to be somewhere in the middle, which is where I would say he is. He's somewhere in the middle. He's saying maybe you shouldn't judge, but when you do, here's another way. Here's his other way. 1, notice and take inventory of the beams in your eyes. And then 2, take inventory of the scales that you're using. He's given another way. Okay, don't judge, but here's how to do it. It's really interesting rabbi move from Jesus. There's a pastor I follow on Instagram this week, maybe it was last week. He posted this whole long article that he wrote about, he was raging against those conservatives as bigots and racists and how he couldn't believe that they would be so exclusive and judgmental. You see? Do you see what's going on? He himself is being exclusive and judgmental in it. And I thought is very powerful for me. It's like we make these judgment calls all the time, but we're not very self-aware that we're doing the exact same thing. One of the most effective ways of hiding the beam in your eye is to focus on everybody else's specks in their eyes. We spend a lot of time focusing on everybody else's blunders and not a lot of time on our own. Like, there's always someone that we need to cancel or correct or something like that, call people out. There's a poet named John Mark Green. He says, the self-righteous scream judgments against others to hide the noise of skeletons dancing in their own closets. The self-righteous scream judgments against others to hide the noise of skeletons dancing in their own closets. So the truth is, like, the things that I'm most quickly to criticize in someone else are also in me. It's wood in both eyes. There's a speck and there's a beam. It's wood. So you're seeing the exact same thing in someone else. Like, that's the point. Same thing. But most of the time, the things that bother me in someone else it's a mirror. I'm just seeing in a mirror. It's maybe in a different version because it's a beam or a speck or whatever. But it's just something I'm seeing in me too. So often our judgment is faulty, or we approach it in the wrong direction. And it's not always because our conclusions are wrong. Like, maybe you actually are calling something out that needs to be called out. But the issue comes when we're either hypocritical in the application of it because we ignore applying that same standard to ourselves, or blind in the fact that that thing is just as much, if not more, in us. Like, that's the thing, is like we make all these assumptions even about ourselves. When we do give people these scales, it's more critical and stricter on them than it is on ourselves even. And when we're wrong, about weighing, it's often too simplistic. Like we'll look at someone and say, this is wrong. It's like that thing Andy talks about in The Office. So he talks about being an art critic. I think he talks about art critic, being a food critic or whatever. He's like, this art is bad. He's like, that food is bad. You know, it's like, that's how we usually make these judgment calls, is like, that person is wrong. It's like, well, are they wrong about everything? Are they wrong about 62% of the things? What about the other percentage and all that? We make these simple assumptions. And once you label someone, that's what this is. Once you label someone, you negate them. Once we label them, we write them off, and we have nothing to learn from them. And that does not lead to understanding. It doesn't lead to purification. It doesn't lead to transformation. To say this person is only bad, like that's not true. Because if we say that about you, you know that that's not true. Like, of course you have some issues with yourself, but it's like, I'm not all that. Like, that's not the only part of me. So that kind of judgment lacks honesty. It lacks curiosity. It lacks understanding. It's overly simplistic. So stepping into the teaching of Jesus, just to summarize that, it does not mean that you don't need to recognize and name dysfunction. Name the brokenness when you see it. But I think it does mean stepping into a different kind of consciousness as you do so. So again, number one, apply the scales to yourself. And then two, work on your own issues as you're doing the recognizing and the naming. It's a massive leap forward. As we weigh others' behaviors, we should be mindful of the fact that we ourselves will be weighed, and we can be weighed by this same measurement. How are we going to change that? So ask yourself, what's the kind of world that you want to live in? And then go and make that world for someone else. Now, quick at the end, talks about pearls and pigs and dogs and all that stuff. I've already talked about this a lot, so I'm not going to talk about it too much, but just to summarize it. Pearls is a Hebrew figure of speech. It means teachings or pieces of wisdom. So you string pearls together. It's a rabbinic phrase. They string pearls together. It's taking teachings and scriptures and ideas and putting them together in a string of in a line of thought, to the extent to have greater insight, to look at patterns and all that stuff. Taking something from here and taking something from there to show some wisdom. So at first, Jesus says, don't judge, but when you do, change it. Be thoughtful and conscious about it. Apply the scale to yourself. Work on your own issues as you do it. He says, as you judge, it should center around synthesizing wisdom and goodness and truth and beauty and helping mend the brokenness in the world. All that. And the good, the true, the beautiful. The truth is that the reality is that people, not everybody will want to hear it. Okay, that's what Jesus is knocking at. Not everybody will want to hear any of that. Not everyone is where you are, and not everybody may not need to be. Like, you can't take people where they don't want to go. So the dogs and pigs is probably a figure of speech, meaning just people who don't want to hear what you have to say. The focus is not on dogs. The focus is not on pigs. I think Jesus is making the assertion that says they don't want that. Okay. What does a dog want? Treats. They don't care about pearls. So you can't take people where they don't want to go or they don't know to go. So there's like immense wisdom in not giving your stuff to people who aren't ready for it, who don't want it yet. You start forcing it, you become one of those evangelical thumpers just on the other side, you know. You misjudge a situation, you cast some wisdom in, and they get angry. They're not ready for it, all that stuff. Of course, it invokes an opposite response. And that's why Jesus says they'll turn and tear you to pieces. So to add a third to the list that Jesus gives us, when judging, one, maybe you shouldn't. So don't judge. And he keeps going. Apply the scales to yourself. Work on your own issues before or address them as you're doing it. And then three, make sure the person you're working with also wants the same things. Also wants the same things. So what's it mean for all of us, just to conclude? The task is to become people who can see and think clearly. In verse 3, Jesus says, why do you see the speck that's in your brother's eye, but don't notice the log that's in your eye? That word for do not notice in Greek is really cool. It also means to pay attention, to observe, to consider, to contemplate. So Jesus is asking us to step into a different manner of seeing, to see differently. He often warns against seeing but not seeing. You guys know those passages? So what does that mean? So to bring it all back to the Ed Catmull stuff, let's go all the way back to the beginning. The whole 40%, 60% thing. Maybe the more contemplative seeing is incorporating stuff like that. And it's not even like nailing it all the time. I don't think Jesus is asking us to be right all the time. I think Jesus is saying to rise above. It's like, what if you know the 40%, 60% thing? That's helpful. Maybe a more contemplative way of seeing is incorporating stuff like the hyperphantasia and aphantasia stuff. I know you see differently than me, and I see differently than you, and we come at this from different angles. So what if we approached it with some curiosity? So you're asking different questions, and you're approaching with different assumptions. It's incorporating truths about bias and prejudice and humility and understanding and assumptions and agendas and the art of listening well. It's the stepping back. You see what I'm saying? Jesus asking us to pay attention differently, to contemplate, to have a different consideration as you do this stuff. So it's recognizing, okay, we see differently. Let's figure out why, and let's see how we can come together on this. So perhaps the Jesus-y thing is rising above the what's, the judgments, and more to the hows. How can we approach this differently? Call out the judgments, but do it differently. Bring yourself to the table, but bring a different self. I think Jesus is asking us to do. So Jesus wants us to engage in a new way of looking at the world, to change not just what we see, but how we see. To see in a greater, more holistic way, to participate in understanding, compassion, generosity, as we help mend the broken world. To help mend the broken world for the healing and the repair of the world, as we give ourselves to those things, we're going to have to help. You're going to have to get your hands dirty and roll up your sleeves and get into stuff. So judgment is not a bad thing. This water that goes in and purifies is also irrigating and creating more life. It's we have to give ourselves to it, I think. But Jesus is asking us to do so in a different way. So here's my challenge for us, and I'll end. 4 things. Find something this week you can judge. Be easy. News or show or opinion or person. Your dad. Drew's over here Andy. Find someone. Find something. And do this. 4 things. 1, pause before you begin. Probably the biggest leap that we could take is if we pause before we start to do stuff like this. Just stop and wait for a little bit. Give it a day and think about it. That's number 1. Number 2, ask yourself, what is the foundation? What's the basis of their, in quotes, wrong that you're working at, okay? What's the foundation of it? This is 2A. So add another, indentation here. Find that foundation, find that basis, and then find that same tension and foundation in yourself. I don't care what it is. And if you have to really work at it, work at it. What's the foundation and the basis of their wrong? And then find that same tension and that foundation in yourself. Whenever you're about to find fault with someone, ask yourself, what fault of mine most nearly resembles the one I'm about to criticize? 3, before you begin engaging it with them or in the world, own your beams. That's what I've been saying to myself. Own my beams. I have beams in my eyes, and I'm going to own them. Make sure that you own the beams first. And then make sure they want to go with you. I told you guys about that psychologist, Adam Grant. He has I'm losing the book now. He's a book. Anyways, he talks about asking someone, the way he phrases it, whenever you want to have a difficult conversation, he says, I'll ask the person, do you want to dance? Because he's we're not trying to fight. We're not pulling out our boxing gloves. We're just going to dance with each other. And I've always thought that was so compelling to me. It's make sure the person wants to go with you. And if they don't want to go with you, I think there's some wisdom that Jesus is saying, don't throw your pearls, So before engaging with them, own your beams and make sure they want to go with you. And this is the last one. Ask more questions than you speak, okay? Ask more questions than you giving answers. It's what happened? Why did it happen? Did something come before it that caused this? What are intentions? I read this study this week that they've done all this research on judges who give like dates of court rulings and sentences and stuff like that. There's this crazy correlation between judges who give their rulings before lunch and after lunch. It's kind of a scandal, and it blew my mind. But depending on how hungry the judge is, can determine your sentence. Kind of blows my mind. But I thought about that, and I was there's so many factors that go into who we are and how we make decisions and what happens. What if you just became more curious? You started asking more questions. What came before this? What were the intentions? How do I feel about those? Are there better ones that we could come around? Do the ends justify the means? Is this necessary in this moment? Try to get overly curious where it's kind of annoying for you, because I actually think if we get to the bottom of stuff, we'll see so many more commonalities than differences. And you may not have any judgments to give anymore, honestly. Get overly curious. And remember, It's all about freedom. Like Jesus is beckoning us to step into freedom. The life of God wants to be lived in you, through you, for you. And Jesus wants us to be free. Free from the obsessive need to correct everybody around you. Wants to change how we do it, but also like freeing those people around you, but also just freeing yourself. Like this is the life. Like what does the life of God look like lived among us and around us? Jesus says it's like this, which is pretty amazing to me. So it's hard, but I think this is our life. This is the world we live in. We live in a world where Christians aren't acting too Jesus-y, and Christians are known for being very judgmental. It's like, what's the task of Mosaic? We said it from the very beginning. It's like, what if we intentionally gave ourselves to learning from Jesus how to live like Jesus? And I think casting our judgments in a different way is a great place to start. Instead of railing against the other side and doing the same thing that they're doing, like, what if we became more conscious? So let's give ourselves to the teachings of Jesus, and I think we'll experience a deeper resonance, the life of God. Like just taking some of that pieces of wisdom from Jesus, like think about the last conflict you had. Probably been a massive change, 100% different if you just approached it with some more wisdom from Jesus, I think. So anyways, I'm just trying to say, I think it's worth it for us to give ourselves to this. So let me pray and I'm done. God, thank you for your grace. Thank you for this teaching. And God, I really hope that we can give ourselves to a new way. In the hard conversations, the stuff we see on the news or social media or a family member saying something at dinner, God, I pray that we can take inventory in a different way. And as we speak, we can approach things with wisdom and grace. I'm not asking that we stop participating in healing the world and helping all that happen. God, I ask that you help us change how we do it. And if Mosaic can be anything, I pray that it's a breeding ground. It's a training ground for us to do that well. And so, God, we ask for grace and we ask for help as we find ways to model the life of Jesus. So this week, as we do these things, we try these things out, God, I just ask for the Spirit to help us and help us to follow the way of Jesus in these ways. And I pray these things in your name. Amen. All right, guys. Thanks. We'll be another difficult passage next week. Talk about prayer. You guys know what's coming up where Jesus says, ask and it'll be given you, seek and you will find, knock and it'll be open to you. Great passage. Very difficult because if you ever asked and seeked and knocked and it didn't happen. so great. That's what we're doing next week. Dinner Thursday and the kids thing got renewed. Is that correct?
Yes, I just didn't send it out yet.
Cool. Anything else anybody want to say? Louis still not sleeping.
I did not take a nap. No.
And he's just vibing.
Yeah.
Look at him. Louis. Chunky boy. I'll keep you guys updated on our bachelor journey. So
Please do.
yeah, absolutely. I know you guys want to. So all right, cheers. No judgment, guys.
Yeah.